I'd like to welcome you guys to the press conference for the Committee for the Preservation of Olympic Wrestling and USA Wrestling. We've assembled a nice group of major leaders here within the sport of wrestling who are going to talk about a variety of different topics that are important to the effort to keep wrestling in the Olympic Games, as well as some major activities that we'll be doing here in the United States concerning international wrestling. The format for this press conference, I'll ask a question of each of our guests after introducing them, and then we'll open this up for questions. As you see, we have an announcement that USA Wrestling's making today in regards to a new initiative in our effort to maintain wrestling as an Olympic sport. So I'll work my way down. We're going to share this microphone, so when we get to the question and answer, please identify who you'd like to speak to. To my immediate right is John Bardis. He serves as the Director of Development and Finance for CPOW, the Committee for the Preservation of Olympic Wrestling. And just like John, to get us started with his perspective of how the effort's going right now and concerns to the U.S. Project to help us keep Olympic wrestling. John?
Thank you, Gary. First of all, it's a privilege to be associated with the CPOW group and certainly with these distinguished individuals at the table, great leaders and great champions of our sport. First of all, it's our belief that every American who has ever wrestled or been associated with wrestling should have their fingerprints on this movement. Wrestling has made, in many cases, and certainly changed and influenced all of our lives. The absence of wrestling in the Olympic Games, in our view, is unthinkable. And as in the words of the late and great Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the modern Olympic movement, sport is part of every man and woman's heritage, and the absence of it can never be compensated for. That is the founder of the Olympic movement. Now, our effort here is really designed to, at this point in time, from a finance perspective, fund what we must do between now and May 15th. We're just going to talk about that. And then beyond May 15th, September, when we go to the General Assembly. So our effort is very strictly focused on procedure and process at this point in time. But America is the greatest country in the world with the largest economy in the world. And we are a single-minded group of people when it comes to the sport of wrestling. And so we call upon all wrestlers, and those of means in particular, to step forward, but not only those of means, those at the grassroots level. If you can give $1 to this effort, I promise you every single penny will go toward the effort and that Rich and the rest of the team are leading to preserve the sport and follow the procedure through September. So we're thrilled to be a part of it, and we fully expect to win. Rich?
To the right of John is Rich Bender, the Executive Director of USA Wrestling, who's been a leader in the international movement to get the wrestling community working together as a unified force in the effort to maintain the Olympic status for our sport. I'd like to ask Rich a little bit to explain the process of what will be going on in the next few months regarding the IOC decision, and to also talk about this new coalition we're announcing today of wrestling federations around the world who are going to work together on this cause. Rich?
Thanks, Gary. I'd like to echo John's comments about the all-star crew that's been established here with CPOW to give our sport a wonderful chance to maintain its position on the program. And certainly, I think one of the things that was evident to us early on was potentially this could be the greatest hour and opportunity our sport's ever seen. Opportunity for our sport to move forward, make changes that are necessary not only at the international level, but certainly domestically and other things that we think we have the opportunity now on the platform to do to improve our sport. Gary asked a little bit about the process, and currently it's important to point out that wrestling is on the Olympic program. We will be contested for sure in Rio in 2016 with all three disciplines, and just with the same program that was contested in London just last year. And I think the process, or certainly the process moving forward, is pretty simple. The IOC in February made a recommendation, the IOC Executive Board made a recommendation that wrestling no longer be a core sport contested on the Olympic program starting in 2020. Wrestling now has the opportunity to present to that same executive board in late May in St. Petersburg as part of the Sport Accord, where the executive board will hear the presentation, a 30-minute presentation from each one of the 8 sports that are competing for that last spot on the Olympic program in 2020. So our goal and our hope is that wrestling will make it through that process in late May in St. Petersburg and ultimately be voted on by the General Assembly in Buenos Aires, Argentina in September. So it's a pretty simple process. I mean, wrestling, I think obviously we all understand the positive virtues of our sport and are confident that we will prevail. But certainly there's a lot of work to do to get to that point. Today we'd like to announce a coalition that's been formed by many of the wrestling leaders around the world with the effort of galvanizing our sport, not just the wrestling countries around the world, but really in all parts of the world. And that coalition will really focus on 5 or 6 major goals. One being to support the political campaign that FILA will undertake to lobby the International Olympic Committee over the next months to ensure that we're successful. Second is to mobilize and to energize the resources in each country to hopefully follow in a similar process to what USA Wrestling has done here domestically. And we will provide resources for other countries to do the same type of thing in their home country. We will promote the World Wrestling Month, which is going to be May. Our National Federation announced just, I guess, Gary, a week or so ago, that May will be World Wrestling Month. We are going to kick off that month with a really special event starting in New York City on May 15th, where the U.S. will wrestle the Iranian national team in Grand Central Station as part of our annual Beat the Streets Gala, followed by Iran versus U.S. match in L.A. on the 19th, and also the Russians will be part of the 15th event as well at Grand Central. Another pillar of the coalition will be to support the new leadership within FILA. I think everyone's aware that there's been a leadership change within our international federation, and Ned Lalovic is now the acting president, and someone that we feel confident has the vision to take our sport to a new level. And finally, just to be a resource for the overall Olympic movement and an asset to the sport as we go through this process. And as I said earlier, really I think it's important to point out that this is an opportunity for our sports to be our sport's finest hour. And I think it's really encouraging to have the support that we have had worldwide and certainly domestically for the effort. And certainly tough days are ahead, but I think our sport's up to the task.
Thanks, Rich. To Rich's right is Pat Christenson, president of Las Vegas Events, himself a great wrestler and NCAA wrestling champion, but a major leader in the sports industry, especially here in Las Vegas. Pat will be working with the entire Las Vegas community to host the 2015 World Wrestling Championships, which are coming here to Las Vegas. An announcement we made a couple of months ago, and obviously Las Vegas has become a great town for the sport of wrestling. We've done many things here and really are looking forward to the opportunity to return to Vegas in a few years with the biggest wrestling event held every year in our sport. So I'd like Pat to talk a little bit about the significance of the World Wrestling Championships, not only for the sport of wrestling, but for the community here in Las Vegas.
Thank you. The World Championships are really a culmination of a partnership we've had with wrestling that goes back over 30 years. My mentor and former wrestling coach at UNLV started a collegiate wrestling tournament. I remember it was over in the North Hall and on the UNLV campus. And then we were at Caesars for a little bit. But that tournament today, I think it's over 30 years long, is the Cliff King Wrestling Invitational, which is Las Vegas Events has partnered with the last 10 years to remain one of the top preseason college wrestling tournaments. In addition, if you look at the partnership we've had with USA Wrestling over the years and the competition that's taken place here, the US, all of the championships, but then we did the Olympic trials also. So for us, this is really a culmination. If you can't get the Olympics, which would require a little bit more capital investment than the World Championships, the World Championships really are, for us in terms of wrestling, and all we've done with USA Wrestling, is a culmination of that. I'm also kind of excited about bringing an event like this to Las Vegas, because I don't think there'll ever be a place where the championships are going to be as exciting. We don't just do events in Las Vegas, we do events around events. And we've had a lot of discussions with Rich and his staff about how do we make the championships here more than just about the championships. And it's interesting, we were talking to John about a concert at House of Blues. Hey, game on. You look at all these different spin-off things, and what we'll do for the wrestling fans here in Las Vegas is they will have the opportunity to come and see the championships, the World Championships, but also we're going to customize an experience around that's been second to none. So we're excited about this, really committed to working with the committee on the initiative to get wrestling back in the Olympics where it belongs. Thanks.
We're truly blessed today to have two of the three American wrestlers who've ever won 2 Olympic gold medals in our sport. The first is no longer with us, George Maynard, who won his Olympics in 1908 and 1912. But the two men at the end of the table are 2-time Olympic champions and among the greatest wrestlers of all time. And I'm going to start with John Smith, who's the next to the right. In addition to being a great wrestler, John's coached our Olympic wrestling team a number of times and is currently one of the top coaches working with athletes that are looking to make the next Olympic Games. And John, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the significance of the U.S., Iran, and Russia competition in Grand Central Station on May 15, and why, when these three nations get together for wrestling, it's such a big deal.
Well, it's a great opportunity, for us here in the U.S. Opportunity first to watch great wrestling, but it's also recognizing that there's 3 of the most strongest countries historically in the world that have got great passion for wrestling throughout their country. It's got great support for wrestling and has really developed wrestling. When you think of wrestling and its development over the years, and you look at the skill that has been developed, the rules that have been developed, and it's been a reflection on all of our wrestling, not just freestyle, but also collegiately. We've taken a lot of skill from these countries and really advanced wrestling, also collegially. So it's a great opportunity. It's obviously we're coming together in New York City for to preserve our Olympic history and keep wrestling in the Olympics, but it's also remember that it's Beat the Streets program with Mike Novogratz and out in LA with Andy Barth that's helping the youth. That what's going to be happening in New York City is not only awareness of wrestling and our cause and our fight right now, but it's also going to fund a lot of young people in junior high and high school and help them realize their dreams and their hopes and continue with that great program that's going on right now with New York City and Beat the Streets, and of course Beat the Streets in LA. So we need to take part on it. It's going to be televised. It's going to be something that we're going to have an opportunity to view probably all over the world, and there's no greater time for us right now than those 2 events to really show our support.
To the far right, and obviously the largest guy here in terms of not only size but also the amount of achievement he's had in the sport of wrestling, Bruce Baumgartner, who competed in 4 Olympic Games and won 2 Olympic titles and had the honor of carrying the flag for the United States in the opening ceremonies at the 1996 Atlanta Games. And my question for Bruce is about, as somebody who has this much experience in the sport of wrestling and in international sport, what would be the case that he would make to the IOC and to the world about why wrestling belongs in the Olympic Games forever? Bruce?
It is kind of interesting they put the heavyweight last all my life. You know, obviously I think wrestling is the world's greatest sport, and competed it, been involved in it almost all my life. And you know, the case I would make for wrestling is if you look at wrestling, it is competed in so many countries. Approximately 180 countries participate in Olympic-style wrestling. We believe that that's a significant number of people. If you look at the number of individuals in the United States, in Russia, Iran, you know, it is significant participation in those countries throughout the world. And it's really participated in wrestling in countries that are not your mainstream sport type of countries. And you know, in the United States wrestling, and you talk about the Beat the Streets programs all over the country, and the two big matches in LA and New York, it is a sport where it transcends the socioeconomical categories. Rich kids can participate, the poorer kids. You know, you don't need a lot of equipment, a lot of extra travel. It's just a sport that it was in almost every modern Olympic Games. It's got a tremendous history. It's, you know, goes back to the ancient Olympics, one of the first, if not the first sport. And, you know, I make the case that if you look at the number of different people, different countries that compete, different countries that win the medals, it should be and needs to be in the Olympics forever, as long as the Olympics are an organization or a competition.
Thank you, Bruce. John, some final words, and we'll open it up.
Sure. I could final couple of words, some thoughts. Number one, as a starting point, the United States of America is founded on certain principles, and we are the leader of the free world, bar none. That includes the principles that we believe all people should live under, and how are we going to address the issue to kids in the Caucasus in the future if this sport is taken away from them? What are we going to say to Iranian kids where fully 70%, more than 70% of the medals ever won by the nation of Iran have been won in the sport of wrestling? So this just isn't an American issue. It's not an American wrestling issue. It is a global issue. And if you think about the movement of the sport and the entire Olympic movement, you know, de Coubertin challenged every IOC president from his time forward to ask the youth of the world to gather 4 years from the close of the modern games. And our objective is very clear. At the close of the Rio Games, whoever is president of the IOC, and there will be a new president of the IOC, we want them to call all the youth of the world, and we want them to call wrestlers to go to wherever the 2020 Games is. And de Coubertin himself made it very, very clear, and he is quoted as having said that all kids, all youth of all social classes should have access to all sport. By the same token, he said that the middle class of this world needed to have access to the Olympic Games. And I can't think of a sport that more defines the middle class, the work effort, the work ethic, than this incredible sport of wrestling. So the American media, we think, is a very powerful force potentially in this movement, and we ask for your voice. We ask for your voice to call people to this movement and also ask them to contribute to it, because while there are those who have the funds to give large checks, we think every dollar counts. As I said before, everybody who's been influenced by the sport of wrestling should have their fingerprints on this fact.
Thank you. We'll open up to questions now, and identify yourself. We'll start with Steve Carr.
Hi, Steve Carr from Review Journal for John Bardis. You're talking about people all over the country donating. Can you explain exactly how much is the targeted goal, and also where is the money going to be used? I'm sure people who are willing to donate are curious, why am I donating? You know, where's it going to go for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is what's the game plan for how we're going to use money? What will people expect, or should they expect this movement, this effort to incorporate? So as a starting point, and the third question you asked at the beginning was, what's it going to cost? We estimate that the total cost of this effort between now and September is going to probably be somewhere around $3 million. Right? Now, up to a relatively small group of individuals has come forward with a little over $1 million, largely because some of the activities that we had to undertake right away required funding. And there really wasn't much time, as we were also enormously surprised by this decision, to decide how we were going to raise the money. So let me explain that in part. The first effort was to develop a game plan to interface with the IOC Executive Committee, right? It was the IOC Executive Committee that made the decision to recommend, hasn't happened yet, that wrestling be removed as a primary central sport for the 2020 games. So the question is how do you work with the IOC Executive Committee? There are those who understand how it works, the inner workings of the IOC Executive Committee, and they're professional in that effort, and we've engaged them to represent not only USA Wrestling, but the sport of wrestling in that effort. So how should we best present the sport of wrestling in this international coalition? And Rich is much better than I am to really address this, but how should we present wrestling as a sport to the IOC in May in St. Petersburg? It is our objective in doing so that they would then pass the recommendation on to the General Assembly to include wrestling as a core sport. But the work that has to be done between now and then is pretty substantial. As Mark Twain once said when he wrote a letter, if I'd have had more time, I apologize for the length of this letter. If I had more time, I'd have made it shorter. We have approximately a 20-minute presentation in front of the IOC Executive Committee. So getting prepared for that and having that content work right is a critical element. There is then another effort beyond that should we get past the IOC Executive Committee. Rich, you have any comments to add to that?
Well, I think, certainly John articulated that very well, and there's some of this that we don't know for sure, exactly what the resource is going to be that we'll need. And, certainly, right now the focus is really, within the international effort, is focusing in on the 15 individual IOC Executive Committee members, and in a presentation that will be made to them, a 30-minute presentation by 5 individuals, Jim Shear, Alexander Karelin, the acting president, and Ned Lalovic, Carolyn Wynn, the Olympic champion from Canada, Lise Legrand, who is the vice president of the French Wrestling Federation, and I guess it's 6 people, not 5, and Daniel Ngali, the Olympic champion from 2000, will be part of that presentation team in St. Petersburg, presenting to the executive board.
So let me just follow up with just a couple things. Basically, we're talking about covering a bunch of administrative and travel costs.
No, that's part of it. The question is, are we covering administrative and travel costs? The answer is in part, but the majority of the costs are for professional organizations who have meaningful experience in interfacing with the IOC Executive Committee.
Almost like hiring a lobbyist in Washington.
I think that's well said. And those lobbyists aren't always just related, but they actually understand the inner workings, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mike, well, for Rich, do you know what the game plan is? So he had mentioned you got to work with each of the individuals within it. And doing so, is FILA inviting any of them to show up in New York on May 15th to witness this?
There will be some invitation extended. I mean, it's interaction with the International Olympic Committee is somewhat of a complicated process, certainly for national federations. But I mean, I think I know FILA's main strategy is one-on-one interaction with the IOC member, the executive committee members, in particular with the acting president, Ned Lalovic. So the primary focus will be personal meetings with those IOC members, and it's really, I'm not sure how many will get to New York. Certainly the acting president of FILA will be in New York, and obviously we will extend invitations to our IOC members to participate in that event as well. But the primary focus is one-on-one interaction right now.
Is there any understanding at all what kind of impact has been made? Because obviously it was like a big picture made today. We see this many times. All these people support wrestling, that type of thing. I've asked this in Des Moines, I'm asking again, is the IOC listening? Do you have any idea of?
Well, I think the IOC is listening, and certainly the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak, in May. But I think certainly we don't agree with the decision that the IOC Executive Committee made, and we endeavor to make sure they understand the gravity and the weight of our sport and the significance that we have worldwide. And obviously, spectacles like today help with that, but it's not just a U.S. effort. I think certainly the coalition is designed to help articulate a worldwide message that how important our sport is in other countries, and not just countries like Russia and Iran and the United States, where obviously I think most people would consider that as the top 3 wrestling nations of the world. But I think everything helps, and I think when there's a tournament being planned in Buenos Aires to be held outside of the IOC hotel, the Hilton Hotel, on the street in Buenos Aires, and certainly it's spectacles and demonstrations like that I think will be, we know will be impactful. But certainly it's going to take a worldwide effort to have the impact that we know we need.
Jason?
Can I just make one comment there, and I think Rich is best to comment on it, but this issue in working with the IOC Executive Committee and ultimately the General Assembly also is a bit of a two-way street, meaning that it's not just us obviously explaining our point of view, but I think the IOC has raised their own point of view as to how the sport of wrestling needs to make changes in order to be modernized for the purposes of staying in the Olympic movement. And Rich, you might want to comment on that because you've been very close to it. It's kind of important.
Well, certainly, there's some basic issues that I think that it's really important for FILA to address. And one being athlete representation on the executive board of FILA. And I think female participation, gender equity is an important topic for the IOC and I think for sport in general. And there's going to be some governance structures that need to change within the International Federation to align themselves better with the IOC and I think be a better member of the International Olympic Committee family. We have an extraordinary Congress that all national federations have been called to Moscow on May 18th to endorse and hopefully establish constitutional changes to FILA that will better align ourselves with the International Olympic Committee. But certainly think there changes that obviously need to be made, and I think it's as I said earlier, an opportunity for our sport to make those changes. Obviously, a leadership change at the highest level within the International Federation was a result of this process, and I think our sport's better for it. I think we're better prepared to take steps forward now to take wrestling to higher levels within the governance, the operation, the presentation of our sport. I'm confident we're going to see some very positive changes over the next months.
Jason?
I guess this question is probably for Rich and John. In terms of the grand scheme of things, you look at the IOC executive board where only one country is wrestling friendly. I guess you could say the Ukraine, and their representative came from the former, what we knew as the USSR. Right, the famous pole vaulter. How much can one NGB like USA Wrestling have in changing this decision when, one, there's 180 federations, there's also how many dozens of different sports, and then there's the ones on the outside looking to get in that spot that I guess they want to vacate for wrestling. How much impact can one federation of all these sports that we have make on influencing a group like the IOC?
Well, and as I said earlier, it's going to take a worldwide effort, but I think it's really evident that the United States feels like it needs to take a leadership role in this process, and I think today's a great example of the resources and the talent that we've assembled here in the United States to really lead the effort and be a partner. But certainly we're one of 177 member federations of the International Olympic Committee, or the International Federation, and certainly currently we don't have a seat at the table when it comes to meeting directly with the IOC. So we've taken the role of supporting our international federation, propping them up as best we can, use whatever resources we have available to us to be a leader and support that effort. But ultimately, it's going to take a group effort from the entire wrestling world to get it done.
And there's more to the story that you probably should know, and it's probably not out there. But when this all came down, it just so happened that Stan Desick was on his way to Thailand for the FILA board meeting. At that point in time, the CPOW, Bruce, John, the entire group got together and had to decide as a team whether or not, as just to go forward if America was going to support the existing FILA leadership. And the decision was made not to. And that decision had to be made literally in a matter of hours, from which point in time, through Rich's leadership, he reached out not only to Martinetti, okay, he reached Stan Desick instantly and provided very clear guidance on where America stood, even though Stan is an independent board member, right? I'm really appreciative and in a lot of admiration of how Rich led this effort, because he didn't blindside Martinetti, he called him. He said, America, fundamentally, you no longer have America's support. And Rich believed and told Martinetti very directly that it was in Martinetti's best interest and the sport's best interest to resign. At which point in time, not surprisingly, Martinetti hung up on him, right? From there, under Rich's leadership, he also, as a result of the group, stepped forward and asked Stan to take an action. And Stan did so with great courage. He stood up and asked for a no confidence vote in Martinetti. Now remember, over this period of time, Martinetti had meaningful penetration on the board. But 11 to 10, we won. The good guys won. That movement, all of that, was led by American Wrestling. Now I'm not saying others weren't involved and others didn't see the realities around how FILA operated, but no question the momentum. And by the way, to give you some sense for Stan Desick, Desick offered himself up as a sacrifice for resignation at that point in time as well, just to do the right thing to get Martinetti out. And probably very easily could have been the president of FILA. But because he offered himself up, he stood down from that, because there was some concern as to whether or not Americans should be leading FILA given the issues with the IOC. So when I sort of think, you know, in hindsight, this book being written, American force and American leadership was hard at work at the tip of the spear on this issue. We're not done, but when you ask some really great questions about how we're going to then work going forward with the IOC, how we're going to work with the General Assembly, the American fingerprint's going to be on this. We have no choice. We're not sitting back anymore. We don't know how this is going to turn out, but fundamentally when it comes to the process, clearly it's going to boil down to a number of coalitions that will have to be formed in the face of what will be three big decisions. One, who's going to get the 2020 games? Two, who's going to replace Jacques Rod, because his presidency is up. And then three, will wrestling get back in? So you can imagine the bifurcations and the formulas that'll come up with coalitions. Think about this not in some different in some respect, at least in my own mind, of the 13th Amendment in Lincoln. We're going to be counting votes. We got to get there first. But I'm incredibly proud of what USA Wrestling has done here. It's a story I haven't told yet, but this entire thing, in my view, was led by American Wrestling.
Can I ask a question for Bruce?
Yeah.
Bruce, real quick, you were also an administrator, not just a coach and everything. You dealt with presidents and said, well, I know this may be an apples and oranges, but as an administrator, what recommendation would you make to FILA or any organization working with something like this?
Well, yeah, I'm part of the committee and a lot of the calls, and you know, I think you just have to stay on course. At least I think FILA and USA Wrestling, CPOW, and I always find that diplomacy, developing the relationships work much better than just being adversarial. The way I view it is we're probably, as an athletic director, I'm not going to tell my vice president or president how to do their job. I'm going to have to convince them that my idea, you try to convince them that it's really their idea and a good idea, and then they'll sort of start to agree with you. And I think that's sort of what John and Rich have tried to explain here is going on with, you know, the recommendation was made. Now we have to make some adjustments in FILA, maybe even thank them for making that recommendation so we could make our sport better, make them feel good about them, you know, try to work together in partnership and not be adversarial and blaming. And I think the people in the United States, the leadership, the CPOW and so forth, have been very careful not to blame really anyone but the former leadership and structure of FILA. I mean, I think that's where everything fell apart in my mind in the wrestling world, was really around one, maybe two or three individuals on FILA that basically caused this situation to happen.
Larry, I think I'm going to try to wrap it up with this because we got a championship to run.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know from my view, I'm always appreciating all the efforts that everybody makes who gets up in here and puts in their time to help preserve wrestling. I'm appreciating the information about the organizational changes that you've said. That seems like the right thing, that people should be cut from the organization. New people come in to help wrestling keep itself together, make any changes. The thing that concerns me, I just heard today, these are rumors and it may not be true, but as I understand, we have a vote in May and then the final vote in September, and we'll see if we're still in the 2020 Olympics. And I'm hearing that we may have major changes in the way the tournaments are run, like national or world championships and Olympics, and the scoring and the rules for wrestling, and that those changes may not even be known until after September. And so I guess what I'm wondering, I don't know who would be the best person to answer, is it true that we're changing the rules for wrestling? If those rules are changed, doesn't that make it hard for us to say, well, we want to preserve this sport, but we don't even know how it's going to unfold after this September?
Yeah, I think the refreshing part of this is that I think we're going to, I mean, not us, but I think FILA will take an in-depth look at our sport and use resources outside of our sport to help modernize the sport, I think is a term that the IOC uses. And I think there certainly is an opportunity for there to be changes to the rules. I assure you that based on my experience with the new leadership FILA, that will be somewhat of a democratic process and one that will be vetted very deeply to ensure that there's not these knee-jerk changes as been, the norm in the past. And I think that, certainly we can expect some changes. I think that the International Federation president has made it fairly clear that he's going to charge a committee with that responsibility of looking at the rules of our sport and making recommendations back to the FILA on how to improve wrestling. And that, I think, by most accounts, that schedule will be something that will be announced maybe after the September vote. You're correct, and rule changes maybe take effect in January. But certainly, I think there is an opportunity within our sport to make some changes that are can be very positive. But I think it'll be a totally different process moving forward in terms of how those rule changes are made. And certainly, protecting the integrity of what we are as a sport is certainly core to that philosophy. So,
Can I just say one other thing about the rule changes? Rule changes, I tried out for my first Olympics in 1980. I do not believe that for the 5 Olympics that I tried out for, the rules were the same for any of the 5. So I think we can't feel that rule changes are necessarily bad or good. It's a fact of life in the sport of wrestling, at least in my opinion, in the many years I've watched it. I started out with three 3-minute periods. I think my last match was 1 5-minute period. Now they're 3 2-minute periods. So it's always evolved. So the rule changes, I'm encouraged as a former wrestler to hear that we have much greater input on what they're talking about, much more involvement of more current athletes than they used to have. Really they had no athlete involvement. So I think it's encouraging that they're looking at, and it might come out the same as it is now. There might be significant changes, but I think the process is much better now than it has been, maybe 20 years ago in changing the rules.
I'd like to thank everyone for being here. We're going to have some big presentations prior to the first match here, so some great photo opportunities for the photographers and videographers, so you're going to want to get back in the arena. And obviously, any of these men will be available to talk one-on-one with anyone. They're going to be here during the finals and in the next few minutes, so thanks for being here, and we appreciate you covering the important issues that we're facing here in the sport of wrestling. Thank you.